Ok, parfait.
And we're into the quarterfinals. It's getting pretty exciting now. Ireland take on Italy a bit later on. First, we'll be taking Argentina and Yugoslavia. El Diego and the lads just about surviving against Brazil. I don't know if they're going to get away with the dodgy water. Yugoslavia might have packed their own after a couple of those claims just to be safe. But first, we're going to check in with how the Irish camp are doing just before. I mean, everyone's been sort of busy celebrating these last few days and the rest days since. The build-up is there. People are probably a little bit worried, but we're very excited. I've seen Mick McCarthy even talk since about the Italy-Ireland game and essentially being like, yeah, there's no way we were gonna lose that. I just knew we weren't. And you're like, that's a lot of confidence from these players. Where did they get said confidence, Turlock? Was it the Pope?
It may well have been, and it may well have been the Pope or even his boss, the man himself, because they've enlisted his help by visiting the Pope in the Vatican on what was a much grander occasion than Jack Charlton had anticipated. Jack Charlton, I think, thought you could just meet and greet the Pope like he was a dignitary before the match, and he didn't realise that they were going to land down in the middle of this very elaborate multilingual blessing and ceremony. By all accounts, Jack Charlton kind of dined out in the story for years afterwards of how he fell asleep and thought, and when he woke up, he thought the Pope was talking directly to him because he was looking in his direction, so he freaked out. Jack Charlton, the only member of the Irish party, of course, who wasn't a Catholic, and wouldn't have known about these things. But yeah, by all accounts, it was a favour to Charlie O'Leary and Mick Byrne, and I'm not quite sure how it was arranged, but the Pope showed a great deal of knowledge and interest in terms of the Irish team. He recognised Packy Bonner. He knew their exploits to date. Jack Charlton went to introduce himself to the Pope, and the Pope said, "I know who you are. You're the boss," which is quite a statement from God's representative on earth. But yeah, the Pope, famously a goalkeeper himself, of course, as people who have a connection to football from other fields tend to be for some reason. But yeah, that was widely remarked upon at home. I think it was kind of considered a quaint little Paddy story in the UK, the fact that they'd gone to see the head of their ridiculous superstitious religion. But
can I just ask Turlock, you've been very critical of goalkeepers. Are you going to be very critical of the Pope?
I think if you analyse that mass, you can see where his concentration does wane and where he is clearly, suffering from tiredness and being 70 years old or whatever he is. He faces up to the Irish team quite bravely, I think. And
considering as well, they're all clad in baggy, dodgy-looking tracksuits.
It's like he's meeting 22 David Ikes, which would be a hell of an occasion.
I have to say, I'd love one of those tracksuits now, looking back on them. There's a bit of MC Hammer, that sort of bagginess about them. But yeah, did you have one?
Yeah, I had the white one with the kind of green chevrons. Had that for years after.
Yeah, the Pope isn't exactly wearing the most up-to-date fashion either.
But it sticks out like such a sore thumb looking at that, because like it just cuts to a shot of the Pope, all the people sitting there, and these people clad in like garish tracksuits over the corner. It's so good. I love it.
I don't know why
the Pope, he probably needs the cloak to hide his tail.
I don't know why they weren't wearing their formal wear though, because they did famously have. I mean, you can find pictures of it. This formal outfit that featured like an Irish wool jumper, which is not really what you want in the south of Italy and in the height of the summer.
That's probably why. I'd say Mick Byrne had his best confirmation gear on though. He was dying to meet the Pope.
To be fair, going by 2002, maybe the Vatican courtyard was the best training facilities they could find.
Well, anyway, Jack doesn't seem to have picked up any of the Pope's air of reverence, because he's back to his brutal best that evening. He orders a few kegs of Guinness in for the players. Tony Cascarino recounted this years later. And he tells them, have a few beers because you're going to lose to Italy. Which is unique kind of psychology. But I think Jack was in a very kind of a very strange place mentally during this tournament. And I think, that might not have been mind games. That might have been a reflection of where his head was at.
Only this not shed any light on the whole Ronnie Whelan or Steve Staunton at left back debate.
Maybe, yeah. There's a great little interview as well, if I remember, where they had Bobby and Jack Charlton both together on, I can't remember if it was St. Reeves. You might have been on something on BBC either. But they had the two of them chatting together about how what a big adventure this was for Jack, and how Bobby says something to the effect of he remembers going fishing with him down somewhere, and this was going to be the greatest adventure they'd ever been on. And Jack and himself are sort of laughing about the fact that he's now on this. So it's quite nice as well. He seems in good order and pretty positive and all there, Turlock. But as you said, behind the scenes, maybe not so much.
He seems to be prone to these mood swings at this point. Again, I'm psychoanalyzing a man I've never met based on what I've read in newspapers. But he does say after the Romania game, he's on a huge high, and he talks about how it's actually the best moment of his life, even compared to winning the World Cup, which is quite a statement. But then he's very testy in his pre-match interviews for the Italy game. I think a couple of the players turn up, Paul McGrath and one other player, and Jack just tells them to fuck off. They're not needed. And the Italian journalists can't quite get their head around the kind of answers he's giving and why he's being so terse with them, and they actually object and say this isn't a press conference. So yeah, it's hard to get a handle on exactly where Jack's head was at. I think the pressure certainly, and the sense of expectation, and the sense that he was carrying the hopes of a nation is something he felt very keenly.
Fair enough. Well, look, we'll get back on to Ireland in just a little bit. First, Dave, we're going to take in Argentina versus Yugoslavia.
After playing 120 minutes in the second round, Yugoslavia, as one team always seems to do, drew the short straw and have the shortest turnaround, just 4 days between their second round win over Spain that went the distance and this game against Argentina. It was, again, it went to extra time, and how much of a factor that was in terms of fitness, I don't know. Argentina had two extra days to prepare. There was quite little action in the 90 minutes. In fact, Dragan Stojkovic, who we spoke about as the hero of the win over Spain, he more or less ran for Yugoslavia within the 90 minutes. Maradona struggled a bit in contrast, I think possibly because of the contrast in styles on show. Argentina were playing mostly attacking football, and Yugoslavia were content to sort of play on the counter, knowing that they had the more sort of technical players and could handle the aggression and the I suppose free-flowing style of the Argentinians. And Maradona, as I said, was kept quite quiet throughout the game. Yugoslavia in 90 minutes and in 120 minutes probably had the edge and should have won it. But despite Argentina having a goal rightly disallowed 3 minutes from time, it did end up 3 minutes from the end of extra time. It went to penalties. The Argentinian coach, Carlos Bilardo, would note after the game that Maradona was playing on only one leg. And I think you'd agree with that, Deck, in terms of I suppose he didn't quite look right during this game and this tournament. Even a couple of years coming into the tournament, he had his injury problems and maybe a few personal problems as well. And he never seemed quite right, but it was the toe on this occasion. And I don't know which leg Bilardo was referring to, but it must have been his right leg that he was playing at, because when the penalty shootout came, he hit a rather soft penalty that was quite easily saved by Ivkovic, who, as we've spoken about earlier in the tournament, hadn't exactly been in the greatest of form. By this stage, Stojkovic had already hit the bar with the first penalty. Savicevic did manage to get one on the board for Yugoslavia, but it was Maradona's miss that kind of turned things. Troglio missed the next penalty for Argentina, and for all intents and purposes, it looked like the Yugoslavians were going to go through. They were 1-up with 2 penalties to go, but missing the last 2 penalties, the last one of which was Hadzibegic, saved by Goicoechea, who turned out to be the hero of the game, and in many ways the hero of the tournament for Argentina.
And this is the thing I was going to, just before we get on to Maradona a little bit more, I wanted to say to you, Turlock, I think with the goalkeepers, as we've talked about, it's a tricky one. I think with players in general at World Cups, you're going to remember it in the moment. It's a little bit on what we said emotionally, how you react and how you adore an act or a phase of play or something like that that's happened in a tournament. Like if people went back and talked about whether Robbie Brady was that good in Euro 20 16, we might be able to say, no, he wasn't in this game or that game, if you analyse it game by game. But we're going to remember that header. And I think that's a lot of what happens here with Goy Cochea. You look game by game and you probably analyse how good he was overall in time. But for big moments, considering he was a sub-goalkeeper, he very much did the job. Retrospectively, maybe not. But does that matter as much at a World Cup? It's got to be about those big moments.
I think it is. I think that's kind of the romance and beauty of a World Cup, and the fact that people back in Argentina who have no particular interest in football to this day will remember Goy Cochea's name, will remember what he did, and people around the world who might not be especially clued in on Argentinian football before or since, again associate him so closely with this game in particular. So no, I'm not going to take the kind of pedantic, actually he wasn't that good, kind of modern football data analyst approach. I think when it comes to football, print the legend, as they say.
And I should point out that Yugoslavia played basically 90 minutes with 10 men after Rafik Sabanadzevic was sent off early in the first half for two fairly ridiculous challenges. But this marked really the end of Yugoslavia as a footballing force. The following year, the entire bloc really broke up. Croatia went their own way, Bosnia-Herzegovina went their own way, and they were left with a rump state that was essentially Serbia and Montenegro, who would keep the name Yugoslavia for the next 10 years or so. But very much it's kind of the end of an era for Yugoslavian football. And I guess in hindsight, it's kind of interesting to see the way they rallied together from, players from all those different cultures rallied together in that game when they were playing with 10 men from the half hour mark, and very much, in my opinion, we're the better team, and we're very unlucky not to go into a World Cup semi-final.
Yeah, it's one of those games where, as you said, they're just running on empty towards the end there, and mentally, one missed peno can really destroy you like that when you've had, as you said, 2 sets of extra time. Argentina are looking fragile at this point, and it mirrors sort of Diego. We kind of mentioned Asif Kapadia's documentary again. I don't want to spoil stuff in that for people who've never really seen it, so very much, if you've not watched it, watch that. It's one of the best football documentaries out there, especially for understanding the kind of pressure and stuff that Maradona was putting up with at the time. And it's what I like about this is Maradona doesn't look like Maradona here. I always think of Signore, what was his name? Fernando Signore was his personal trainer, one of the lads he got very, very close with when he was living in Italy. One of the few people I think he felt he could trust in Italy from the start. And if you look at some of the workouts he does and how amazingly in shape he was compared to certain other times in his career where he just didn't look up to it.
A personal coach from Italy who has a particular effect on a player and makes them look the fittest in their lives.
But just for this, right? There's a quote from him: "For Diego, I would go to the end of the world, but with Maradona, I wouldn't take a step." And it's hard to find out which one he is during this, because he just looks, as you said, David, a sort of shell of the player, whether it's down to all the injuries, injections, the personal life, but even something like, as you said, running up to take a peno. I mean, mentally, he's always been able to stave off, any sort of bullshit or any sort of people giving him guff, and nearly thrive on it a lot of the time. But at this point, he's just looking shot, and it's such a tame peno that really, if Argentina had gone out at this point, this is maybe one of those clips that you'd use to bury Maradona's career towards the end.
Well, I think at this point he wasn't the best player in the world anymore. His I guess, what would you call them? His magic at club level certainly guiding Napoli to 2 league titles, which was completely unprecedented. Those were kind of over, and he was sort of maybe starting to wind down a bit. But it's similar to the way you see Argentina with Messi at the moment. Over the last 12 years, they always seem to get into a situation where no matter how many great players they have, they always tend to rely on one, whether it's Maradona, Messi, even Kempes before him. Even if he wasn't quite as quite in the same league as Maradona, they always seem to have that way of just I don't know. They never seem like a coherent team, and that can have a huge emotional toll on that one chosen player, as we've seen with Messi over the past decade or so, and as I think we saw with Maradona in '82 and in 1990.
Yeah, I suppose it doesn't feel completely like the wheels are turned off because we've just seen a moment of brilliance from him in the Brazil game, but so soon after that, again, he just looks shot. Is interesting, but we'll have to see how Argentina fare a little bit later on in the tournament. Instead, move on to Italy versus Ireland.
These are a selection of today's Italian newspapers, and they're all crucifying Maradona. Let's have a look at some of the headlines. La Gazzetta dello Sport, the most popular of the Italian newspapers, says Maradona KO'd, Maradona humiliated. Tutto Sport says Maradona ripped apart. And Corriere dello Sport says Maradona risks elimination. And they also say Argentina really humiliated.
The lineups here, Turlock, I want to talk about, because all those fucking Achilles, as he screamed, has healed up. The Pope must have worked some amount of magic for that, because he's back in the lineup.
He is, and I think there are grounds other than his fucking Achilles not to have him in the team, because reviewing these games, he hasn't been up to scratch, and even to the extent that he was in subsequent years or was during the qualifiers. But I think Jack Charlton is really a creature of habit, and Aldridge is clinging cockroach-like to his place in the side. But we'll see. He may have a much better performance in this game. Some
players like Steve McMahon and Aldridge have been absolutely caned throughout this tournament by us, and cockroach-like might be the bottom of the barrel for all, though. But as you said, look, he's in the lineup for this one. I mean, we'll get on to Jack being a creature of habit a little bit later on in this as well. But it's a very, very interesting game, this. Not an amazing amount of chances to speak of. One of Ireland's best comes about 25 minutes into the game. Quinn has pretty much cemented that he's taken over from Cascarino, I think, over at the tournament at this point. He's been very good here. He's troubling quite a few of the Italian defenders, which is interesting. Again, I suppose it brings, I suppose, more credence to the target man being a bit of a UK and Irish sort of tendency, because the likes of Baresi just looks pretty troubled by having the physicality and the power of Quinn up there. But 25 minutes in, great chance for Niall Quinn. Paul McGrath has an absolute stormer in this game, it's fair to say. And he crosses from the right, finds Quinn in the box, who heads down to the right, but Zenga is well up to it. He leaps across. It's a very good save, actually. It probably should get a little bit more credit. He leaps across really well, very, very cat-like reflexes, and he holds it as well. He doesn't just parry that one out. So early on, Quinn troubling them, and there's a little bit of hope for us there. You wonder maybe the two big men again, could it have been the answer?
I have to eat my words, actually, because I think Aldridge played really well in the first half of this game. He's playing kind of more of a link man as a link man than chasing the ball into the corners and running up blind alleys, and I think he does it really well for the first time in the tournament. I watched this game back recently, and it really looked as though for the first 15-20 minutes, there's a real change in how Ireland play in these last two games, because I think they've realised you can play at that intensity, that kind of high pressing game in Italian heat, even in the evening, and expect to survive. So I think what's happened here is that Jack has decided that rather than risk the opponents going ahead and then rely on Ireland's kind of energy and tenacity to get them back into the game, Ireland are going to try and nick a goal in the first 15-20 minutes and then just defend it. And Ireland have a real go in these first 15-20 minutes. The Italians are really on the rack. They're really rattled. As you said, McGrath is everywhere. He's playing fantastically well. And watching it back, I kind of, for the first time since 1990, one of those weird games where football has its own kind of momentum. And even if you've seen the game before, I know Ireland don't score in the first 25 minutes, but I still expected them to because they were so far on top.
Yeah,
McGrath was magnificent, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's the kind of game where you nearly expect him to win the ball, cross it in, and then get on the end of it himself. He's absolutely everywhere. But it is bar that, I think in the first half, there's only a bit of a half chance for Scalacci that he flicks wide, pretty much right after Quinn's effort. Actually, it shows you the Italians are still dangerous. They're just when we think our confidence is high and we're putting them under pressure as we like to, they do have a bit of a half chance. And as you said, the pressing is an interesting one, because there is patches in the game of Romania where maybe not with the same intensity, but they are still very much pressing high on. And as you said, maybe a change in the game plan, but it seems like the game plan is still working relatively well. If we take that overall Jack Charlton game plan, which is not to concede early, to keep it pretty busy until late on, and then maybe hit them with something like the two big target men to really exhaust them. But as you said, Baresi, a few of the other defenders struggling, and maybe there's a sense of the two target men in there early on could have just bombarded those defenders into a few more mistakes. But
Maldini seemed to really struggle with the movement of Aldridge and Quinn as well. He seemed to be going around barreling into people for most of the first half, and as you said as well, Baresi didn't look particularly comfortable, and those are at the time two of the best defenders in the world, with probably playing in the best defence in the world.
Late in the half though, unfortunately, Baggio breaks down the right. There's a plenty of chance to foul him, I have to say. You watch that back so many times, you go, somebody give him a kick when you know what's coming. He finds Scalacci, who plays it back to Giannini. Then over to the left-hand side of the goal is Donadoni. And Donadoni's just got too much time to think about what to do here. I think it's McGrath who's trying to charge him down. I'm not sure it really should be McGrath, but it probably is McGrath, given what we've said earlier in the game about him. He absolutely blasts one, does Donadoni, at Bonner, and it's pretty much the thing about it is it's a bad save. It's right at him, but it's so powerful, and there's probably a bit of swerve on it. So I'm willing to give Bonner a little bit of pass with the parry itself. It's more that the parry has no real intent or direction. He's not trying to push it anywhere, and his feet, he gets his feet completely wrong. He ends up pushing it out directly in front of the goal as he nearly sidesteps over. He's nearly at his right hand side post, out of the goal. So once he slots it back, and unfortunately it falls to Scalacci, who does just, as you pause it, I mean, he's got an empty net. Lovely finish though. Yeah. He's an empty net though. He's an empty net to choose from because Bonner's
still there's players getting back, so he has to hit it first time, and it's just a very well struck shot first time.
I don't know what you think. I mean, we'll come to our resident goalkeeper Slater Turlock here, because I mean, it's hard to watch back, because as you said, Bonner's the hero in the last one. He guesses the right way with a few of the penalties and gets them. Is it just that it's blasted and swerved so much that it kind of takes him by surprise and he gets his feet wrong? Because I look back and I try to figure out what's happened there.
Yeah, it is a bit baffling, and it's the one serious mistake he makes in the tournament. But yeah, I'm not sure I've ever seen a mistake like this. I'm not sure I've ever seen a goalkeeper overcompensate like that and end up in such a wrong position for the rebound. I have heard him talk about it in years subsequent, and I think what he said was he was expecting the shot to move a lot differently than it did. In fact, when I watched it back today, I was looking to see did McCarthy get a deflection on it, but I don't think he does. Because, yeah, Bonner's completely wrong-footed. He just he's thrown off balance. And it's Scalacci is actually in a strange position to pick up the rebound, which I suppose just shows what an opportunist he was at this time, or, how honed his instincts were, because he's kind of in a sort of wideish left position. McGrath very nearly gets there. That's the tantalising thing, is a shot just goes under Paul McGrath's calf. But it's a really nice finish, yeah. But I can't give an explanation for what Packy was up to. It might just be the power of the shot threw him off bounce.
He was always a parrier, though, wasn't he? He always preferred to parry than to try and catch the ball. I don't know if it's kind of the GAA thing, but he always seemed to, you even see it in the highlights of England in '88. He's like, he always kind of went to bat the ball away rather than to kind of bring it into himself. And I think it's even if you look at the famous shots of him kicking the ball out to Niall Quinn, or just to any time he kicked the ball out when he kind of grimaces and bites his lip, it's almost like he just hates the football and wants it as far away from himself as possible.
Which is fine, only for he essentially got out of the goal. You know what I mean? Parrying is all well and good, but you still have to be in the goal after you've parried. It's the sidestep, and that's the ultimate problem. There's a fair chance he could have saved the second effort if he hadn't fallen over himself and fallen.
It kind of looks like he's kind of wheeled away to celebrate. It's a great save.
It's funny, Dave, you mentioned those long kicks, because one thing you'll notice is the way he stumbles forward after them. He kind of loses his balance and stumbles forward after he sends those long kicks upfield. So maybe it was a balance issue. My dad always reckoned Niall Quinn should have gone to ballroom dancing lessons to improve his balance. So yeah, maybe Niall and Packy as a pair.
Gary Payton would never get a game.
Can I just say the subsequent quotes you mentioned from Bonner? Any idea who Jack subsequently blamed for this goal?
It was Staunton, wasn't it?
I think it was Aldridge for giving the ball away on the halfway line.
Kevin Sheedy.
Oh, it's Sheedy for playing the ball to Aldridge's feet that he blames.
So this is the thing, right? I've got a breakdown of it here, right? Sheedy from wide out on the left hits Aldridge with a pass to feet, right? Around the left back sort of position as Aldridge coming forward. Aldridge has so much opportunity to lay the ball off. He essentially runs into one Italian defender who's trying to get tight to him and then straight into another, right? So he could lay it off anywhere or boot it away or whatever. Then you take into account, right, Italy win back possession at that time. And as I said, someone should foul Baggio. Townsend tries to and makes an abysmal effort of it. Townsend should clip him. He should clip the feet and he should take him down.
Looking after his left foot.
Yeah, but he should. He should just bring Baggio down, simple as, free kick around the halfway. And then, as we said, we've broken down Bonner getting out of the way. So I think there's definitely ample opportunity for a shared blame there. But yeah, Sheedy with a routine pass to a forward to his feet on a plate for him, which happens, I think, about 3 or 4 more times in the game for a couple of other players. But Jack is like, if he'd have kicked it forward like he should have, like I told him, and you're like, come on.
But that's interesting, because I'd heard that quote years ago, and looking back at the goal and thinking, yeah, Jack has a point there. That's not how Ireland play. But in this game, that very much was how they played. They played a lot of balls into feet and worked a lot of good positions from there.
But am I mad that Staunton did get the blame from journalists? Because I'm fairly sure for a few years afterwards, there was kind of a cloud over him, because he goes, when Aldridge kind of stumbles with the ball, he goes dashing forward as if to take it, but it seems like Aldridge then pokes it under his legs and he's left completely exposed. And I always remember from my childhood that, you know, in the years after 1990, it was always the kind of view that Staunton was the one who messed up. I don't know if it was to protect the kind of Packy or whatever, but it was always the kind of view that I had. And, you know, anytime I watched it, I've never been able to understand where that came from.
Yeah, Packy got away with murder. Actually, he was never particularly blamed for this goal at all, but he's clearly the culpable one. Anyway, I think we've analysed this as though it were the Kennedy assassination.
Absolutely. Well, look, there's probably not too much to get too in detail after this point, because we know we're in trouble now. The Italians love this. It's a stereotype of the way they play football, but defensively they're happy to defend at 1-0 and really just close us down from creating any more. Paul McGrath, a little bit after into the second half, has a bit of a half volley from about 20 yards. It's gone wide, unfortunately. About 10 minutes from time, McGrath, once again, I could pretty much just say he is involved again, because it's McGrath all the way along. He heads down for Aldridge. Aldridge is a bit off balance, and defender nips in to clear it when Aldridge should probably get a shot away. We also, interestingly, as you said, Jack being a creature of habit, see the introduction of John Sheridan again, or this time, as opposed to when he wanted to bring John Sheridan in last time and had to bring in David O'Leary because of injury. So brings him on, leaves Ronnie Whelan on the bench, which was a big criticism from a fair few, including a well-notable player, or ex-player and pundit we'll talk about in a few minutes. But it didn't seem to have gone down massively well, the Sheridan substitution.
No, I remember being baffled by it at the time, because he hadn't really had a sniff or any indication that he was in contention. It is pretty late in the game when he comes on. I think it's 77 minutes, something like that. Yeah, 78 minutes. Yeah. I think he's brought him on purely for his set piece ability, just in case, you know, there's a free kick around the box, and also
pop in general.
Yeah, Charlton was always a big fan of John Sheridan's ability from long range. It was one thing he always criticised his Ireland teams for, the fact that they didn't have the confidence to shoot from range a lot of the time. But yeah, what's kind of also interesting is that obviously Cascarino has already come on for Quinn and plays quite well. But when Sheridan comes on, Andy Townsend goes up top, which is not the first time that's happened in his early Ireland career. But yeah, Andy Townsend will eventually get 7 goals and 70 caps, so probably better off, you know, shoving McCarthy or Moran up front to just cause some havoc.
I do think that kind of the lack of ability, or the lack of I suppose willingness to shoot from long range, I think it's probably something that only Sheridan maybe in the team and Staunton could maybe rectify, because, you know, the way the game was going, particularly that period, the first kind of 25 minutes, any sort of sniff of a chance that Ireland got, you just saw the whole Italian back four just perfected exact moment to step forward and play Aldridge offside. You know, for all the good passages of play we had, we didn't really have the ability to kind of work our way in behind the defence. So it was either set pieces up to the big man and hope that something kind of bounces our way, or, you know, have a bit of a threat from a different area than we usually do. And that would probably suggest to me why he came on.
I should mention, when we're just talking about all these drives from far out, I mean, Ireland struggled to make a whole lot more chances. Italy don't make an absolute bundle either. They're happy with the 1-0, but again, from set pieces, they're very dangerous. And Schillaci absolutely rockets one off the bar, which bounces down and out. And I think a lot of the Italian coaching staff and players feel that it went in, but it doesn't look to have on replay. But unfortunately, we can't create a whole lot more. We try, and we just don't seem to have that extra bit. And it ends 1-0, the hosts through. And I think that was always the fear of the early goal. But I think a lot of credit taken from this one. I mean, I mentioned that certain journalist. I read Eamon Dunphy's piece after all of this, and it is fascinating to read that. He has some nice quotes. He poignantly writes that we lost on the field, which for all nations bar one is the inevitable end in the World Cup. What we have gained as a community will be stored forever in our hearts. Unpoignantly, though, he makes some absolutely wild claims, mainly that the officials, Portuguese referee Valente Silva, his Costa Rican and Colombian linesman, Dunphy refers to them as a Latin referee and two inexperienced linemen who would be more likely to flag the Irish offside rather than the hosts.
Yeah, and that was widely held at the time, and the players themselves still think they were robbed in that game. I just watched the full 90 minutes back. Referee had an excellent game, and that was, yeah, I remember thinking myself that he very much favoured the Italians, but I suppose it just shows the pitfalls of partisanship. In fact, right at the death, funnily, we were talking about John Sheridan hitting shots from long range. Ireland get a free kick in stoppage time, about 25 yards out. It's rolled to Sheridan, and he just skews it miles wide, and the referee whistles it back because the Italian wall moved. So Ireland chip it in, doesn't come to anything. But yeah, not the action of a man who's trying to engineer an Italian victory.
There was a lot of that with regards to the players not being 10 yards back, because the Irish, certainly for Schillaci's free kick, there's about 3 players who are on top of Schillaci as he's about to unleash the shot. You know what I mean? There's a lot of that kind of stuff. But as you said, I think it's a rather outrageous claim from Dunphy. But look, at least he's moved at least he's pointing now towards other people than Jack and the team, now that there's something to be proud of there, and he wants to join in with everyone else and blame the refs. So, and that's it for Ireland in Italia 90. I have to say I've enjoyed covering them. So what we might do is sort of wrap up, because we're going to have to focus on other teams. I'm sure we'll be able to keep an eye on the press and the heroes welcome they do get. But let's talk a little bit about this campaign and wrap it up for Ireland. Turlock, I mean, you have the best memory of the lot with this. How does it resonate with you, this whole thing? Obviously, you look back on it very, very fondly, but was there a strong feeling they should have got a bit further? Was there a strong feeling this is about as far as we could have hoped for?
No, I think everyone thought Italy and Rome was a death sentence. But watching the game back, like I remember Ireland kind of being battered and being lucky to lose 1-0. I think this was as close as the English game or the Dutch game. And, a ball breaking in the box, and, it could have been a different story. That said, would you have fancied Ireland in extra time? Would you have fancied Ireland in penalties against the host? I think this was the natural end of the line for this Irish team. But yeah, I suppose we've done our little bit of revisionist history around the Egypt game. That it wasn't necessarily the absolute abyss of football that it's been portrayed as. So I think, yeah, just a thrilling tournament from an Irish point of view. Every game was close. They came back constantly. They showed a very keen sense of narrative with all those relatively sort of late equalizers. It was exactly the sort of team and exactly the sort of tournament and exactly the type of performances that was kind of tailor-made for people who didn't know a huge amount about football to really fall in love with them. And, with the nature of international football and with the drama and theatre of it. So, yeah, my memories of it are being at the time kind of pissed off that they went out in the quarters, but at the same time acknowledging that was kind of the logical end for a team that had really given second best to no one, but maybe didn't quite have the quality that a world champion needs. I kind of think we mentioned in the previous episode that Robbie Brady goal against Italy. I kind of think what spoils that is that there's a horrible defeat to Belgium in the middle of that tournament. There's nothing. I know the Egypt game is a disappointment, but there's nothing comparable here. This was a team that never really got walked over by anyone, even the stars of the Italian team in their own backyard. And I think it's a very kind of impoverished understanding of football that says that, oh, we didn't win anything. They only made the quarterfinals. There's nothing to celebrate. They didn't actually win a game. I think if you were there and you were in any way in possession of something close to a soul, you understand what this meant.
So from an Irish perspective then, again, Turlock, you're going to be better placed than us to pick this, but we'll still have a go. Player of the tournament, who's the standout man?
Paul McGrath for me. Just his for someone who's remembered as kind of a consummate defender, just his class on the ball and just how untroubled he was by playing on this stage. I mean, obviously internally he may well have been very troubled by the pressure and a range of other things, but none of that. He betrayed none of that on the pitch. He just looked like he was playing on a Sunday morning, and in a Leinster Senior League game or whatever. He was so casual but also so classy. I think a goal from Paul McGrath would have really capped the tournament off, and he was close a few times. But yeah, for me, just for seeing an Irish player perform with that level of confidence and that level of technical ability, a guy who, as I said, was primarily a central defender. For me, he's easily Ireland's player of the tournament.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to hear too much of a disagreement on our side for that, for the most part. I wonder, credit to the likes of Steve Staunton, who emerged at the tournament as well. I suppose you wouldn't say that about too many of these, actually. It's not like a team of it's not a team of youngsters, and there's nobody particularly, bar you're saying the likes of Sheridan and maybe Quinn starting to push Cascarino out of the fold a little bit more here. So players like that deserve a bit of credit, but yeah, Paul McGrath by leaps and bounds for me.
For me, you look at Staunton, as you say, he kind of established himself out of not really. I don't think anybody really expected him to take the left back slot so soon, but he more or less made it his own. And I guess Ray Houghton also probably peaked during this tournament, and in a very understated way was a hugely important part of things. But you can't really look past Paul McGrath, especially for a player who'd left Manchester United under a bit of a cloud, and I think most people would have thought that he was winding down his career at that point. But I think very much that tournament is probably the peak of his career as well, and it was probably the best tournament performance by an Irish player ever.
And that's it for Ireland then. We will be back to check in with how things are going at home as they take in the rest of the tournament, the odd time. But we're going to focus tomorrow on the rest of the quarterfinals. Czechoslovakia versus West Germany. And also, very interesting one in Cameroon versus England coming up.
I will pick who I like, and I'll say what I like. And if I wanted to say something that I didn't like, I would if I wanted, but I don't, so I won't.
I phoned David up and I said to him, do you want to come? And he said, no, I've booked me time on holiday. I'm going on holiday. I said, well, you could do with coming. I didn't really need David, and I told him that. The Irish press did not understand why I didn't pick David O'Leary. And I said, well, I don't need him. I didn't need him. But I said, when I do need him, I'll call him up and bring him in. And then it happened that I did need him, and I called him up and brought him in.
And if I wanted to pick somebody that I didn't like, I would if I wanted, but I don't, so I won't.
So what you're saying is, Jack, if you would pick